She gave me 72 hours to tear down my own home, not a knock, not a hearing, not a question, just a deadline and a smile like she had already won, but the moment she tried to lock me out of my own cabin, she triggered something no policy could suppress. This probably is not the first time someone mistook their homeowner association badge for a throne. Drop your story below if this feels all too familiar. My name is David Miller, 58 years old, and after 35 years as a county land inspector in California, I thought I had earned some peace. I inherited my father's cabin on Pine Lake, part of a 50-acre plot he bought in 1985 to build a peaceful, respectful community. For a while it was just that, but everything changed when Margaret Thompson moved in 3 years ago. At 52, she quickly took over as homeowner association president and turned the neighborhood into her personal kingdom. She enforced absurd rules: no laundry lines, no flower planting without permits, even house paint colors needed approval. Most residents stayed quiet to avoid trouble, but I had spent my career dealing with people like her. Margaret did not realize I knew every law, loophole, and boundary line, and she had just picked the wrong person to push around. The whole mess started when I planted a single sunflower in front of my porch. It was nothing special, just a seed I had thrown in the dirt because I liked the idea of something bright and cheerful greeting me each morning. Margaret showed up the next day with her clipboard and that condescending smile, explaining that I needed homeowner association approval before making any landscaping changes. I politely declined, telling her it was my property and I would plant whatever I wanted. That is when I saw her expression shift from fake friendliness to something much darker. What Margaret did not realize was that in 1985, my father had purchased the entire 50 acres surrounding Pine Lake. He had leased 45 acres to the homeowner association for the symbolic fee of $1 per year, with the vision of creating an affordable community where families could thrive. I had inherited that land and had never bothered to increase the rent, believing that good neighbors would govern themselves fairly. After I refused to get permission for my sunflower, Margaret launched what I can only describe as a systematic campaign of harassment. It started small but escalated quickly. Monday morning brought a $200 fine for improper vehicle placement. My old pickup truck was parked exactly where it had been for 3 years on my own property, but according to Margaret's interpretation of the rules, it was now detracting from neighborhood aesthetic. Wednesday delivered another $300 penalty for unauthorized construction because of the wooden fishing chair I had built near the lake. Friday brought $150 in fines for non-compliant exterior paint color. My cabin had been natural wood since the day it was built, but apparently it was not on Margaret's approved color palette. Each citation came with threatening language about escalating enforcement actions and community standards. I started documenting everything. 35 years as a land inspector had taught me the value of meticulous record-keeping. I photographed every citation, noted the dates and times of Margaret's visits, and began researching the legal documents governing our homeowner association. Something about her aggressive approach felt off, and my professional instincts were telling me to dig deeper. Margaret's next move was more sophisticated and much more cruel. She organized an emergency homeowner association meeting without inviting me, where she painted me as a community disruptor who refused to follow basic neighborhood standards. Neighbors who had been friendly for years suddenly started crossing the street to avoid me. Mrs. Garcia stopped waving from her garden. Tom Johnson, who used to invite me to weekend barbecues, would not make eye contact. The whisper campaign was methodical and effective. Margaret told people I was potentially dangerous, that I had anger management issues, and that my presence was bringing down property values. She positioned herself as the brave community leader, trying to protect everyone from the unstable old man by the lake. The isolation was immediate and painful. These were not just neighbors. Some of these people had become genuine friends over the years. But Margaret made one crucial mistake. She underestimated my patience and my professional background. While she was busy turning the community against me, I was quietly gathering evidence. I installed additional security cameras around my property and began recording every interaction. More importantly, I started pulling public records on the homeowner association's financial activities and reviewing the original land agreements my father had signed. The harassment escalated to frightening levels when Margaret decided to involve law enforcement. She called the police claiming I had made threatening gestures during a conversation about her citation authority. The officers who responded were professional and thorough, interviewing both of us and reviewing my security footage. The video clearly showed me standing calmly on my own property, asking polite questions about the legal basis for her fines. The false police report backfired on Margaret, but not before causing me significant stress and embarrassment. Having police cars in your driveway tends to confirm neighborhood suspicions, and Margaret made sure everyone knew about the incident. She posted on the neighborhood's social media page about escalating safety concerns and the need for protective measures against non-compliant residents. What Margaret did not know was that the responding officers were familiar with overzealous homeowner association complaints. Officer Martinez took me aside and quietly advised me to document everything carefully. "We see this more often than you would think," he said. "Power goes to people's heads, and they forget there are laws about harassment and false reporting." Margaret's campaign reached a new low when she began targeting my property directly. I came home from a grocery run to find my mailbox had been removed and replaced with a temporary post holding a notice about non-conforming mailbox violations. The original mailbox had been there for decades, but Margaret claimed it did not meet current homeowner association standards. She also had the community landscaping crew accidentally trim branches from the oak tree that shaded my porch, claiming they were encroaching on common areas. The tree was clearly on my property, but Margaret seemed to believe that her homeowner association position gave her authority over everything in sight. Each action was calculated to be just legal enough to avoid obvious criminal charges, but intrusive enough to make my life miserable. The psychological pressure was intense. I began to understand how people could be driven from their homes by persistent harassment, even when they were legally in the right. Margaret was counting on me to give up and move away rather than fight back. She had no idea that her behavior was being recorded and documented by someone with decades of experience in property law and public administration. The final straw came on a Saturday morning when I returned from a supply run to find my fence destroyed and my sunflower cut down at the roots. Margaret had hired a landscaping crew to remove non-compliant plantings and structures while I was away. The sunflower that had started this whole conflict was gone, and the wooden fence I had built around my small garden lay in pieces. Taped to my front door was a final notice: "Last warning. Serious homeowner association violations. You have 72 hours to voluntarily demolish non-conforming structures or the homeowner association will proceed with forced compliance." The security cameras had captured everything, Margaret directing 3 men to destroy my property while saying, "This old man needs to learn his place." That evening I sat in my cabin, looking at the pile of broken fence posts and the empty spot where my sunflower had grown. For the first time in weeks I smiled. Margaret had finally crossed the line from harassment into criminal property damage. More importantly, she had no idea what she had just unleashed. I walked to the basement safe where I had kept my father's legal documents for 40 years. It was time Margaret learned exactly who she was messing with. My first call was to James Morrison, the real estate attorney who had helped my father structure the original land deal in 1985. At 72, James was still sharp as a tack and practically rubbed his hands together with glee when I explained the situation. "David, I have been waiting 40 years for this conversation," he chuckled. "These homeowner association tyrants need to learn about the difference between real authority and imaginary power." We spent 3 hours reviewing the original lease agreement, and James' grin grew wider with each page. The contract included a clause allowing rent adjustments to fair market value with 30 days' notice. For 40 years I had charged the homeowner association $1 annually for 45 acres of prime lakefront property. Current market rate for similar land in our area was approximately $10,000 per acre per year. The legal implications were staggering. Not only could I increase their rent to $450,000 annually, but Margaret's property destruction gave me grounds for criminal charges and civil damages. James drafted the official rent increase notice while I prepared evidence of Margaret's harassment campaign. My background as a county land inspector proved invaluable as I conducted a thorough audit of the homeowner association's activities. What I found was shocking even by Margaret's standards. She had been systematically violating both the lease agreement and state homeowner association regulations for over 2 years. The clubhouse and swimming pool had been built on my land without the property owner's consent, a clear violation of the lease terms. Margaret had unilaterally increased homeowner association fees from $200 to $400 monthly without proper member voting procedures. Most damaging of all, she had diverted $15,000 from the community fund to pay for landscaping improvements to her personal property. I discovered falsified meeting minutes, forged signatures on official documents, and evidence that Margaret had threatened residents with fines if they did not vote for her in homeowner association elections. The woman was not just a petty tyrant, she was running what amounted to a criminal enterprise disguised as community governance. The most surprising development came when Robert Thompson, Margaret's husband, appeared at my door at 8 o'clock in the evening. The man looked exhausted and genuinely remorseful as he asked if we could talk privately. "Mr. Miller, I cannot stand by and watch this anymore," he said. "Margaret has become someone I do not recognize. The power has made her cruel." Robert revealed that Margaret's behavior at home had become increasingly erratic and controlling. She monitored his conversations, checked his phone, and flew into rages when anyone questioned her homeowner association decisions. He provided me with a USB drive containing Margaret's emails and text messages with other board members, including evidence of vote manipulation and financial irregularities. "This is proof that she forged signatures to become homeowner association president," Robert whispered, handing me printed emails, "and here is the list of families she threatened with fines if they did not support her." The evidence was damning and provided the final pieces I needed to build an airtight case against Margaret's reign of terror. James and I finalized the legal documentation that would end Margaret's power trip permanently. The official notice was simple and devastating. Effective 30 days from this date, the annual lease fee for Pine Lake Community will be adjusted from $1 to $450,000 in accordance with fair market rates for comparable lakefront property. We also prepared a civil lawsuit against Margaret personally for property damage, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The criminal complaint for destruction of property would be filed with the sheriff's department. But the most important document was the formal request for an emergency homeowner association meeting to address critical issues affecting community survival. Through my network of former colleagues, I connected with Sarah Kim, an investigative reporter for the local ABC affiliate who specialized in homeowner association abuse stories. "This is exactly the kind of story our viewers need to hear," she said enthusiastically. "People are tired of petty tyrants hiding behind homeowner association bylaws." Sarah's preliminary research revealed that Margaret's behavior was not unique. She had left her previous community after similar conflicts with neighbors, and there were online complaints about her management style dating back years. The story was bigger than just my personal conflict. It represented a pattern of abuse that deserved public attention. The weekend gave me time to prepare for what I knew would be the most important community meeting in Pine Lake's history. Margaret had spent months positioning herself as the protector of community standards. Now she was about to learn that real authority does not come from bullying tactics or fake titles. I sent formal meeting notices to all 67 households in Pine Lake community as was my right under homeowner association bylaws. The subject line was simple: critical information about land ownership and community future. Margaret called within an hour, screaming about my unauthorized meeting, but I calmly reminded her that any community member could call for emergency sessions when vital issues arose. The community hall was packed beyond capacity by 7 o'clock Wednesday evening. 89 people crowded into a space designed for 50, with neighbors from adjacent communities drawn by rumors of drama. Sarah Kim and her cameraman took position in the back with Margaret's permission for filming having been reluctantly granted under public meeting laws. Margaret arrived with a thick folder of documents, clearly expecting to control the narrative. She had no idea that her 40-year reign of ignorance was about to end in the most public way possible. As community members settled into their seats, the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew something big was coming, they just did not know what. I stood before the community that had become my second family and asked a simple question: how many of you know who actually owns the land that Pine Lake community sits on? The confused murmurs and blank stares told me everything I needed to know. Margaret's face had gone pale, but she still believed she could control the situation. Margaret, I continued, since you are so concerned about property rights and community standards, would you like to explain to everyone who holds the deed to these 45 acres? When she remained silent, I pulled out the leather folder containing my father's original documents. Let me introduce myself properly. I am David Miller, son of Robert Miller, who purchased this entire 50-acre tract in 1985. I am the landlord. You have been paying $1 a year to rent this land. The silence in that room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop as 89 people processed the implications of what I had just revealed. Margaret looked like she had been struck by lightning while murmurs of shock and confusion rippled through the crowd. I connected my laptop to the room's projector and began methodically presenting evidence of Margaret's violations. The security footage of her directing the destruction of my fence and sunflower played in crystal clear resolution, with her voice clearly audible ordering the men to teach this old man his place. The financial records were even more damaging, spreadsheets showing Margaret's unauthorized fee increases, invoices for $15,000 in personal landscaping charged to community funds, and forged meeting minutes where she had literally signed other people's names to approve her proposals. Each revelation brought gasps of outrage from community members who were seeing their trust betrayed in real time. But the most serious violations, I continued, are these threatening emails Margaret sent to families who questioned her authority. Robert's evidence filled the screen, message after message where Margaret had threatened fines, legal action, and even eviction for residents who dared to oppose her decisions. Mrs. Garcia, the elderly woman who had stopped waving to me, stood up with tears in her eyes. Mr. Miller, I owe you an apology. Margaret told us you were dangerous, that you had threatened violence. I was scared to talk to you. Her voice broke as she described how Margaret had isolated her from the community for asking questions about the budget. Tom Johnson, my former barbecue buddy, was next. Margaret fined me $800 for letting my kids play on the grass after 6 p.m. She said it was damaging community property. My family had to cut back on groceries to pay those fines. Story after story emerged of financial harassment, social manipulation, and outright bullying disguised as community governance. Lisa Park, a single mother of 2, delivered perhaps the most damaging testimony. Margaret threatened to have my children removed from the community playground if I did not vote for her in the last election. She said troublemaking families were not welcome in Pine Lake. The room erupted in angry murmurs as people realized the extent of Margaret's abuse of power. Margaret finally found her voice, standing up and shouting over the crowd. You are all being manipulated. I have worked tirelessly to improve this community. Every rule I implemented was for your own good. Her face was red with fury as she pointed accusingly around the room. This old man is trying to destroy everything we have built together. What exactly have we built, Margaret? I asked calmly. A community where neighbors are afraid to plant flowers, where children cannot play outside after 6 p.m., where families go hungry paying your arbitrary fines. The contrast between her screaming and my calm questions made her appear even more unhinged. You do not have the right to humiliate me in front of everyone, Margaret shrieked, her carefully maintained facade completely shattered. I am the president of this homeowner association. The irony was perfect. In her moment of greatest claimed authority, she had never looked more powerless. Sarah Kim, the reporter, asked permission to address the community as an outside observer. I have covered dozens of homeowner association disputes across the state. What I have witnessed here tonight represents one of the most clear-cut cases of power abuse I have ever documented. Mr. Miller has the legal right to terminate this lease agreement entirely. The room fell silent as people absorbed the implications. Their entire community could be dissolved overnight if I chose to exercise my property rights. But I had a different plan. I have no intention of displacing families from their homes, I announced, but we need new leadership that serves the community instead of exploiting it. The no-confidence vote was not even close. 64 residents voted to remove Margaret from all homeowner association positions, with only 2 opposing votes and 1 abstention. The relief in the room was visible as people realized their nightmare was finally ending. Margaret sat in stunned silence as the community she had terrorized for 3 years formally rejected her authority. Margaret gathered her papers and left the meeting in complete silence, followed by the uncomfortable stares of people she had spent years intimidating. Robert remained behind, apologizing to individual families and promising to cooperate fully in recovering the stolen community funds. The man seemed genuinely relieved to be free from his wife's toxic influence. Mrs. Garcia was unanimously elected as interim homeowner association president, bringing 30 years of elementary school principal experience to the role. Her first official act was to formally apologize to me on behalf of the community and request my guidance in establishing fair and transparent governance policies. The local news coverage began that very night, with Sarah Kim's initial report generating hundreds of supportive comments from viewers who had faced similar homeowner association harassment. Our story was becoming a symbol of successful resistance against petty tyranny, inspiring others to stand up for their rights. Mrs. Garcia proved to be everything Margaret was not: collaborative, transparent, and genuinely interested in serving the community rather than controlling it. Her first official meeting drew 53 attendees, compared to Margaret's typical gatherings of 8 to 10 people. The new board included Tom Johnson as treasurer, Lisa Park as secretary, Dr. Martinez as legal advisor, and surprisingly, Robert Thompson, who was determined to atone for his wife's actions. The first order of business was financial transparency. Homeowner association fees were immediately reduced from $400 to $250 monthly, with detailed budgets provided to every household. All expenditures over $500 would require community approval, and monthly financial reports would be mailed to each resident. Property regulations were completely overhauled. The ridiculous restrictions Margaret had imposed were eliminated, leaving only basic safety and sanitation requirements. Residents could now plant flowers without permits, hang laundry outside, and let their children play until 8 p.m. instead of 6. The change in community atmosphere was immediate and remarkable. Margaret and Robert's divorce proceedings moved quickly, with Robert gaining custody of their 2 teenage children, who had been embarrassed by their mother's public behavior. Margaret was forced to sell the house to pay restitution for the $15,000 she had stolen from community funds, plus $5,000 in damages for destroying my property. The criminal charges for property destruction resulted in a $2,000 fine and 100 hours of community service, which Margaret served at a homeless shelter under court supervision. She was also required to attend anger management classes and was permanently banned from serving on any homeowner association board in the state. Most satisfying of all, Margaret's departure was entirely voluntary. Rather than face daily reminders of her public humiliation, she moved to Florida to live with her sister. Robert remained in Pine Lake with the kids, becoming a respected member of the community as he worked to repair the damage his ex-wife had caused. Sarah Kim's follow-up report titled "The $1 Landlord Who Fought Back" became a viral sensation with over 2 million views across various platforms. The story resonated with viewers nationwide who had faced similar homeowner association harassment, turning our community dispute into a symbol of successful resistance against bureaucratic bullying. I received hundreds of emails from people sharing their own homeowner association horror stories and asking for advice. Several attorneys contacted me about using our case as a precedent in similar disputes. The attention was overwhelming but ultimately positive, as it highlighted the need for homeowner association reform across the country. The story contributed to California passing what became known as the Pine Lake Amendment, requiring all homeowner associations to maintain transparent financial records, provide clear appeal processes for violations, and face state oversight when abuse complaints exceeded certain thresholds. Our local dispute had generated statewide policy changes, protecting homeowners from future tyrants like Margaret. Pine Lake community transformed from a place of fear and petty restrictions into one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the county. Property values increased 15%, not because of strict rules, but because people genuinely wanted to live in a community where neighbors treated each other with respect and kindness. The waiting list to buy homes in our community stretched 3 months, with prospective buyers specifically citing our collaborative governance model and community spirit. We had proven that neighborhoods thrive through cooperation and mutual respect, not through fear and micromanagement. Mrs. Garcia and I partnered to offer consulting services to other communities struggling with homeowner association disputes. Our success story gave hope to residents nationwide who felt trapped by petty tyrants in their own neighborhoods. Tom Johnson and I started a monthly workshop teaching practical skills to community kids, while Lisa Park was elected to the city council, bringing our collaborative approach to municipal government. Today, exactly 2 years after my confrontation with Margaret, I am sitting in the same wooden chair she once tried to have destroyed, looking out over a community garden that now includes 15 families growing sunflowers together. We planted them to commemorate what we call Sunflower Day, the anniversary of our community's rebirth through standing up to tyranny. The small wooden sign on my cabin door, carved by Robert as a gesture of friendship, reads David Miller Community Friend. But the title I treasure most is not on any sign. It is the sound of children playing on the grass until 8 p.m., the sight of neighbors chatting over garden fences, and the knowledge that we built something better from the ashes of Margaret's toxic rule. My father bought this land 40 years ago with a dream of creating a peaceful community. It took 4 decades, a power-hungry bossy person, and one old man's refusal to be pushed around, but that dream finally became real. Sometimes protecting peace means fighting for it, and the greatest victory is not beating your enemy, but building something beautiful from what they tried to ruin. Margaret tried to make me the enemy of this community. In the end, she helped me become its best friend. The sunflowers in our community garden stand 8 feet tall now, turning their faces toward the light, just as our neighborhood learned to turn away from darkness and toward hope. The real lesson is not about beating petty bullies, though that is definitely satisfying. It is about remembering that real power does not come from scaring others or fake control. It comes from service, respect, and the bravery to stand up for what is right, even when you are standing alone. Sometimes the quietest person in the room turns out to be the strongest.